Hello, low ego action heroes. It is your friend Debbie Levitt from deltacx.com, and welcome to episode 74 of the podcast. This one's going to be Sobering Realities for UX Juniors, starring Sam Harper, who wrote a great Medium article on this topic. So we're going to be bringing him in just a moment, and we're going to be taking a look at his article and walking through it, and of course taking your questions live on LinkedIn, live on YouTube, and now extra special, live on Twitter. If you would like to tweet in questions, just make sure you use hashtag DeltaCX all together, and my system should catch them. We'll experiment here, okay? We're usability testing this. So let's bring in Sam and learn more about him if he's new to you. Sam, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, Debbie. It's good to be on.
My pleasure. I think this is your first time. We've talked about it in the past, and finally it has happened. So while I set up some of my screens and make sure I'm watching the chat for questions and comments, introduce yourself, spell your name, and tell everybody who you are.
Yeah, so my name is Sam. I'm a UX designer in Salt Lake City, Utah, and for a while I was on the agency side, and I've now switched to an in-house role that I'm happy to be a part of. I frequently contribute to Medium, so you can read a lot of my articles as I'm posting them, both on my blog Growing into UX and also in the UX Collective blog.
Okay, and for people who like to have things spelled for them, on Medium you are Samuel Harper, so S-A-M as in Mary, U-E-L, and last name Harper is H, like hippopotamus, A-R-P, like Peter, E-R. And on LinkedIn, you're just Sam Harper. So I hope everybody will find Sam and follow him in all possible legal places, and get to know his thoughts and his work a little bit better. So if you want to find his Medium article, it's so hard to send people a link to Medium because the URLs are so long, but you can easily find it if you Google Medium Samuel Harper Sobering, because the name of the article was 10 Sobering Realities Every Brand New UX Designer Needs to Accept. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And hello to Paul, who is joining us already in the YouTube chat. So I want to walk through the article a little bit and get you to respond to each of the 10 things you said were these sobering wake-up calls. But first, let me ask you, what inspired you to write this article?
Yeah, so really okay, so let's backtrack a little bit. So back to the beginning of 2019, I actually came from boot camp years ago. Debbie, how you feel about boot camps? They definitely do have.
I don't love the boot camps, but I love people like you. So.
Yeah. So I mean, I made it through. Really happy I did. And what I did is at the beginning of that year, I wrote an article called "Your UX Bootcamp Will Not Get You a Job Unless You Do These Critically Important Steps." Basically, it was about how a lot of people, they'll come into these boot camps and they'll think like, oh, the boot camp's going to do everything for me. No, it won't. I mean, it can give you like a fundamental understanding of user experience, but like it's not going to go out there and get you a job. It helps you network and build your brand. Like you got to do that yourself. And that's what the whole crux of this article was. Now, this was actually my first Medium article that I ever wrote. I put it out there thinking it would get viewed maybe 100 times, and that's it. And it turned out it actually like exploded in popularity. Like I did not see that coming at all. That got me onto the UX Collective blog. But what I did at the end of that article, when I wrote it, I figured like, hey, I might get a few people to connect with me. I always put a link to my LinkedIn profile and say, hey, if you like the article, connect with me on LinkedIn. And then once it exploded in popularity, then I'm getting like 20 people asking to connect with me every day. Like it was crazy. And a lot of them, of course, as my article was targeting, it's brand new UX designers. So what I found is that they would start messaging me and they would say like, hey, thank you for writing this article. I'm struggling with this thing. What are your thoughts? And what I found is that they were asking the same questions. Different people were asking the exact same questions, just in different ways. And I realized that, first off, it's going to be overwhelming if I have a phone conversation or if I have a detailed message with every single person connecting with me. But then also I realized, like, hey, look, I can summarize what these people are asking me in a Medium article. And that's what I found, is that, like, with a lot of the things that these people were asking, and like a lot of these misinterpretations of what boot camps do for people, like, I wanted to be able to summarize that. So that's where I critical.
All right. Well, then let's jump in. And first, let's also say hello to some friends of the show who are pressing likes and things on LinkedIn. Sylvia and Ram and VJ is back, and April, and I'm trying to get everybody's names here. This last person looks familiar, but LinkedIn's not giving me your name. Kelly. So thanks for joining on LinkedIn. So the first point you make in your article is, hey, sobering reality for a brand new to UX person, you are not yet the ideal candidate companies want. Give us the 1-minute version of that.
Yeah. So what these boot camps do is that they sell people on this idea that you're just going to go in, you're going to do this class for 12 weeks, and then you're going to get out and you get hired with Google. And what I wanted to say is that that's actually not how it goes. That's not how any profession at all. It doesn't matter if you're an accountant or if you're in therapy or whatever. Like, they always want you to come in with experience. It's not necessarily a good system, but it's unfortunately how it is, and it's the game we have to play. So what I highlight is that whenever you're starting out, you really don't have a lot of leverage, and you have to understand that and be okay with it. And of course, like, that's not a bad thing. Like, everybody has to start out somewhere on the bottom rung usually, and this is like, this is really the good time to, what I say is, dive in, understand that you're not the top, you're not like that ideal person that they want, but you can get there with, like, however that would be. If you need to do some internships, or if you need to shadow some UX designers, or like, however that is, start out small, be humble, you'll be able to grow big eventually.
Okay, great, thanks. And that kind of leads into your second point in the article, which is you don't have a lot of bargaining power right now. And what do you mean by bargaining power?
Yeah, so again, this really goes to the fact that most UX jobs, the vast majority of them that I've seen, ask for between 3 to 5 years experience. So that already under a big thing too is they want you to be able to know what you're supposed to do when sideways. And you really can't get that out of a boot camp, because when you're in a boot camp, everything goes perfect. There are no clients changing their mind. There's no egos within the company leadership. There's no funding that's drying up, and yet that happens all the time in the real world. So whenever they're saying, like, we want you to have experience, they're saying, like, we want you to be able to hold your own in this not so perfect environment where, sometimes things don't go right, or there's development limitations, where you can still, like, overcome that stuff and do that work without really needing to get your hand held.
And we've got some great, let's just put a couple of comments up on the screen right now. We've got Lucas, who said, I finally got an offer in South America. I was terrified of accepting it. When I came across your article, I knew I had to go for it. So look how you've inspired people.
Yeah. And what I also want to say thank you for that, Lucas. What I also want to say at the same time too is there's really never going to be a perfect moment to start your UX career. There's definitely going to be moments where you're going to say, like, am I really good enough to do this? And Debbie, I know we talked about this a little bit, but nobody knows everything at some in their career. Even highly experienced people in UX are still learning new stuff. And on one hand, don't let your ego inflate you and say like I can like start an ad agency, or I can start like I can start my own UX company when you've just graduated from a boot camp. Or but at the same time, you don't want to say like I can't do this because no one will hire me. It's There was actually, I read a book a long time ago. I don't remember which one, but it was about this film director that was talking about getting into Hollywood, and he equated it to like breaking into prison. He's like, it's
Breaking into
not
prison.
it's breaking into prison, not breaking out of prison. And it was like, it's not easy. You got to be really creative about how you're going to do it, and you're probably not going to be able to replicate it again, because then they're going to figure out and block it off. Getting into design is not that hard, but it's not as hard as breaking into Hollywood, in my opinion. But it's still not an easy task, and it really requires a lot of initiative, a lot of personal creativity to be able
We've
to
also
like
talked
do
about
something.
on the show how it really requires a lot of resilience. You can't let
Yeah.
things get you down
Oh
for
yeah.
too long.
Yeah.
Quick
Yeah.
hellos to some people who joined. Quick hello to Katie and Josephine and Maya. So, we've got lots of people in LinkedIn today. So, sorry to interrupt you, Sam, but I'm so happy to see everybody joining. Remember, we are taking your questions and comments live on LinkedIn, in YouTube, and now on Twitter if you tweet with hashtag DeltaCX. Let's see. So where were we? We were looking at, I like point number 3. It's really interesting. It says you may have to move, possibly to a place you don't particularly care to move to, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sam, did you have to move for your first job?
I did, yeah. So I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado. I've lived there most of my life, and I remember applying to all these different positions just all over the country, both in Colorado and outside of it. I applied for positions in San Francisco, New York City, and Austin, and all these places. I didn't hear from a lot. Actually, the vast majority of those positions, when I had no experience, they didn't get back to me. They either sent me an auto rejection email, or I just got ghosted altogether. But what I found interesting is that I did get a response from an agency that was out in Eastern Tennessee. And at first I looked at it, I was like, why would I move out there? That they don't have a good tech scene, but
They
I
are the
interviewed
tech
with them.
scene.
Yeah, but then I interviewed for them, and I realized like, hey, this would probably be a really good opportunity to get my foot in the door. I'm just, and then they wound up giving me an offer, and I moved out there. Turned out they actually had a better tech scene than I thought, and it was, it wasn't perfect. The downside is I was the only person on the UX team at the time. So it was very much like trial by fire. It was not a perfect role to learn in, but at the same time, like I think a lot of these trial by fire situations is how I ultimately had to become a better UX designer.
I think that's a great point, because I hear a lot of people say to me, well, Deb, I really hope my first job is going to mentor me and coach me. And I hope I end up in this company with this big UX organization, and there's going to be someone who's looking over my work and helping me level up. And I go, that does sound beautiful. That kind of goes with, that does sound beautiful. And I hope you get that. But not a lot of UX jobs are crafted that way. Many of them put you as the only person in the company, or the only person on the team, or the only person on the project. And I always hope that when thrown into that situation, people will go find a mentor or coach outside of work and maybe get a little bit of the help and support that they're looking for, and don't just feel in over their head and drowning.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't have mentorship at your company, then look for like outside resources. There's like Debbie, like you coach people. I know there's also the ADP list, which I know has become like really popular, and that's got a huge resource of all these UX designers who have listed themselves as mentors. Like I would definitely check that out too. I think that's a phenomenal resource for, I mean, anyone in their UX career, but especially new people.
Yeah, and we have episode 59 if you want to check the archives of the channel here. Episode 59 was how to find a mentor. So check that out. We give you some tips on things to look for and things to be ready for in yourself. We've got some questions for you, so I am going to pull one up here. Jason in YouTube is asking, do you recommend joining a startup at the start of your career? And I hear this one a lot because, a startup usually expects you to be all the things.
Oh yeah. I don't know if you're going to answer that question or me.
Go for you.
Honestly, I can't answer that question for you. Because really, like, it depends. It depends on a lot of things. Like, is this a startup that you really care about? Because if you're going to be in a startup, you're going to be working like a long, long time, like 12, maybe even 18-hour days. Assuming it's like really early stage. Startups are also a lot more unstable. The nice thing about that is that you do get a lot more control within the company if it does go big. I think it's important to also realize that, again, I'm going to scare people off from startups, but the vast majority of startups fail. I think it's like 98% or 99%
90
of them.
plus, so, yeah.
Yeah, so I would definitely go in understanding that it's going to be one hell of a roller coaster. You can learn a ton, and it may succeed, it may not. If you're okay with putting in long hours and probably not making a lot of money for a while, then you could definitely look into it. And whether that's a yes or a no to look into that for you, like, I can't answer that for you. You can, but I would definitely just take those things into consideration.
Great, thanks. And we've got another question on LinkedIn, which I can't put up on the screen. Katie asks, what is the most important skill for a trial by fire position?
That is a fantastic question. I'm going to say that being able to take feedback. I mean, that's important in any role, but there's going to be a lot of instances where, like, you might put out a design and then your coworkers come back and they're like, "Oh, this is garbage. Why did you do that?" And, instead of just saying, like, getting uppity and mad about it, saying like, "Okay, like, why is it that way?" And it's also a great justification because maybe you were right and they're not understanding like what you're doing. So then that is challenging you to be able to step into these designer shoes and say, I did this for this reason because this is going to impact this company and impact the company in this way, and it's going to ideally lead to like this kind of revenue, this kind of outcome which translates to revenue.
Yes, and my answer would be skills for trial by fire, critical thinking. Always do your critical thinking. Don't just do whatever the boss says. You try not to become an order taker. That's how we undo UX really fast. So I would say keep your critical thinking hat on. And I would also say curiosity, because you are going to have to Google a lot of stuff yourself. You are going to have to go to your mentor or your coach and say, somebody said this today and I'm not too sure what it is, So I think curiosity and critical thinking are important in every job, but especially if you're going to be the lone UX slinger in a trial by fire position, you're going to really need those and that resilience. I'll see our podcast on the 10 traits a UX practitioner should have, because it's probably all 10.
I like your hat, by the way. It looks.
Thank you.
I like your Mickey Mouse hat. It looks kind of steampunk-ish.
It is. It actually, this was made by Disney, and this is a Disney Steampunk Couture.
Cool. I love it.
So, thank you. That is my critical thinking hat, and this is my CX UX hat, though it's not green screen friendly. So be careful. Let's see. Could Sam repeat and spell the name of the list of mentors ADP list? Yes, it's correct. It's A Apple, D Delta, P Peter. It stands for, I think, Awesome Design People. I think it's adplist.org. I am not on it. If you guys want me as a mentor or coach, just write to me. You know where to find me. But if you're looking for non-me, ADP list is one resource you can check. And again, see episode 59 for picking a mentor. Before I get to the next point of your article, we don't have a sponsor here, but I do have a 10-second video about my company, so some of you can learn what I actually do.
Delta CX, available for CX and UX consulting, projects, and training. Contact us for a free consultation.
Well, holy cats, that's it. And also, won't you please usability test the subscribe button if you're in YouTube? Just make sure it works, make sure it's on. Click that bell thing, test that out for me. And won't you please empathize with the like button? And won't you please click it so you can tell the YouTube algorithm that this is a good video to show to other people. Special thanks to my boyfriend for writing these jokes. So let's go back to your article. Now, point number 4 of your 10 sobering things were, hey, your first UX job or two might be a low salary. And I know that's sometimes in contrast with what people think the boot camp promised them. Tell us about those low salaries.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, this is still going on the crux of what we talked about previously, which is that you haven't established yourself quite yet. You're not yet that ideal person that these companies want. In all my time looking at job descriptions, I have never found a single job that said we want someone with no experience who graduated from a boot camp. That's not to say that you can't get in, but again, that comes down to you got to be able to be creative. You have to, break into prison, as we talked about. And you have to be able to think outside the box to be able to get this experience so that you can get in. And so as far as not having that high salary. So again, these boot camps, they usually say oh, we want someone with, sorry, let me rephrase that. They say that, oh, you're going to make 6 figures right off the bat. And it's they're selling you on this dream that isn't really real. For some of my first UX positions, I was making less than an elementary school teacher. That's not to say that I was starving or anything, but I wasn't making a lot of money, and that's okay because you're not at that ideal stage yet. You have to be able to be okay with the fact that your salary is not going to be that high. It will eventually get high. I will say that the amount of money I'm making now compared to when I first started out has dramatically increased, but it takes time, it takes patience, it takes
you have to level up.
Yeah, and it takes one of the biggest things that I think is important is being able to work in the real world and not work in a mock Disneyland world that isn't quite how reality is.
Very true. When I first moved to the San Francisco area to try to kind of formalize some of the things in my UX career, because I had done it as a freelancer and an agency, but I figured, let me get some real San Francisco experience on my resume. And I showed up, and to San Francisco, I was new. And I kind of had to start, not quite at the bottom, but certainly not in a well-paying job. And I think my first job in 2012, and so that's 8 years ago, I was age 40, so I'm 48 now, and I think it paid $40 an hour before taxes were taken out. So after taxes were taken out, maybe $30 an hour. These are obviously some, to some people they're going, I wish I could make that. That sounds great. I was given a senior level title because I had done this rodeo before, just not in San Francisco. But obviously the rate of pay was low. And it took a while to level up to the types of numbers that boot camps promise or suggest. Maybe it's not a promise. Because I find that they tend to be using Glassdoor numbers for San Francisco for seniors. And let's just say this, and I don't know if you found this, Sam. San Francisco salaries are on another freaking planet than the rest of the world. The rest of the world. Anything. Go ahead.
I mean, if anything, sorry to interrupt you, Debbie. If anything, I think that people they'll look at these San Francisco salaries and they'll be like, oh my God, I can make this much money. But to get a place in San Francisco, every single month, that's getting a place in San Francisco is the equivalent of buying a decent used car off Craigslist every single month. It's that expensive.
Yes, I was there. I can say this is absolutely true, and I love the way you put that, because I've bought a decent used car quite recently here where I'm living now, and yeah, it's almost that. I was sharing a house with the guy I was dating at the time, and our rent was $3,600 a month to share a house that was a 20-minute drive outside of downtown San Francisco. When I had an apartment that was even closer and smaller, that apartment was $2,400 a month, and I lived there alone. So yeah, people have to remember it's all relative, and certainly now that I'm in Europe, I can tell you European salaries are much lower, but that doesn't mean they value you less. It just has to do with where cost of living and where salaries are right now. I don't want people to be offended by it. I started out offended by it. You want to pay me what? Good day, sir. And then I had to wake up to the idea that my time in San Francisco skewed me, and this really isn't what most places pay. Kathleen the Bear Guzman says, yes, cost of living in the Bay Area is crazy. I know from experience. And Paul says, yeah, try living in San Francisco. Yeah, be willing to. And that year that I worked for like $40 an hour, I went into debt. I put crap on my credit cards. I put groceries on my credit cards just to eat. But I said, you know what? I'm going to do this for a year, and then I'm going to work my way up, and I'll pay off those credit cards. And the next year, I paid off the credit cards. So I'm not proud of debt. I'm not happy with debt. I don't want to see people go into debt. I'm not recommending you go into debt. But at age 40, I wasn't going to be living with mommy and daddy at that point. So it's kissing frogs, everybody. Next thing on Sam's article, because we are half done with our show, I can't believe it. So point number 5, your boot camp or other UX education does not guarantee you a job regardless of what anyone tells you. Sam, tell us more.
Yeah, so this is another thing that you'll hear a lot from these boot camps. And again, as I'm saying this, I want to highlight, like, I'm not anti-boot camp. However you, or at least how I see it, however you can learn this stuff is fine. But I want you to be aware of, like, what is reality versus what is marketing. So when you see these boot camps that are saying, like, we're guaranteeing that you'll get into the industry in 6 months. I mean, that's that's like a pretty loaded thing to put a guarantee on, because nobody foresaw COVID happening, for example, and all these layoffs. And now it's really difficult to get hired. Nobody foresaw nobody can foresee, like, the market. Are we going to have like this amazing economy and then it's going to crash overnight? Nobody can foresee, like a lot of these external factors that the boot camp has no control over. And then also I'd say another element of that is, what is the internal side of things? So as far as internal for the person who's applying, so are you actually doing the work? Are you really, like, doing a lot of these things that you need to be able to doing, like personal branding and using LinkedIn and stuff like that? Because, like, even if you got the world's best UX education, if the student sucks, then it's not going to work out. And by sucks, I mean that in a kind way. I don't mean like you're a terrible person. I mean, like, if you're not putting in the effort and you're just expecting some kind of tremendous output to happen to you.
Just a reminder, episode 72 was expressing your personal brand on LinkedIn. So that might be something that will help people. Oh, all of these shows are archived, people. If you can't make them when they're happening live, or you just want to check them out later, go to the YouTube archives. Everything's always archived. It's completely free. There's no membership or secret handshake. And you can even watch them at faster speeds and watch Sam and I get it done in faster than an hour. Let me go back to your article. So that was the boot camp doesn't guarantee you a job. And I've even seen people with master's degrees come out of schools and still feel like they weren't really grasping UX because of what or how they were taught. Some school programs aren't great. And some of them are not job ready. So really, it's about being job ready. And for people whose schools are giving that job guarantee, read the fine print. I've read the fine print on a couple of them, and just remember, not everyone who goes to the school is going to qualify for that guarantee. Sometimes you have to live in a certain city, you have to prove you are applying to X jobs a week. There's a whole bunch of hoops to jump through to get that guarantee. So be very careful, because you might not qualify. Paul is still talking about living in San Francisco. I used to tell recruiters, why would I want to live with 6 other developers in a 1-bedroom, make $250,000 a year, and starve to death? Paul, slightly dramatic today. So, friend of the show, Paul. He's usually here in a good way. Point number 6 from your great article, which I hope people are clapping for. You are a junior UX designer at best. Tell us more about that point.
Yeah, so sometimes people will get into this, they'll get into UX and they'll say like, I'm a senior, or, you know, like, I want this big sexy title. In fact, I'm quite perplexed whenever I go on LinkedIn and then I see someone who previously had no experience in UX and then all of a sudden they're a director of UX.
Oh my God, like, can I please run this effect?
Yeah.
Stop doing this, people. Stop inflating your titles. All right, back to you, Sam. I'll try to control myself.
No, I like it. It's funny. But yeah, so it's, you know, just because somebody learned UX, learned the fundamentals of UX, doesn't mean that they're there. You know, there's people, like I said, like there's people who have been in this field for decades who still don't feel like they're there. One of the things I also talk about in the article too is the Dunning-Kruger effect, which basically it's this chart that says like if you have no experience, then you shoot way up. Oh, that's where my hands are. You'll shoot like way up to the top as far as how much you think you know, and then once you learned a little bit more, you're like, oh my God, I don't know nearly that much. And then as you learn more and more, like you go up and up and up, but it's like this gradual decline or gradual increase until you get to the top. So that first initial hump is called the peak of Mount Stupid. I think Mount Naive is probably a better term, but it still stands that the vast majority of the time we have to go through that. And I think that one of the biggest superpowers that a UX junior can employ right now is to be aware of Mount Stupid before they even get to the top, before they even get there. This, you know, to basically say, you know what, I'm not a UX senior, I'm not a director, I'm starting out from the bottom rung, and I'm okay with that. And this can especially be hard for, I mean, yes, there's like young people who have to start at the bottom, but then there's a lot of people who are transitioning careers. I've met people in their 50s who are trying to get their first UX job. You know, maybe they were a director at another company, and now guess what? You got to be a junior. That hurts. I know it does, but
yeah, I want to add to that, and I've had a couple of lovely conversations and unattractive fights with people who are like, but I have 7 years in marketing, and I'm like, well, congratulations, I have a degree in music, and you know that having experience in some other place, it can speak to your maturity as a person. It can speak to your ability to work in a corporate environment, but it doesn't speak to your ability to do UX work because now you are transitioning into something else. And so it's hard, and I've had some ugly fights with people who tried to tell me, well, no, I've been doing marketing research for X years, now I want to do UX research, I must be a senior. And I appreciate that your article reminded everybody that if you are moving into this career, either as a younger person or a career transitioner, you might be starting at junior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you got to be, it's important to be fine with that. And I tell people that the first step to enlightenment is to realize how little you know.
So true. And that brings back the Dunning-Kruger thing, which was actually your 7th point in the article, which was you probably know far less about UX design than you think you know. And the way that I like to explain Dunning-Kruger to people is watch American Idol auditions and watch the people who are terrible singers but are absolutely sure they're the next American Idol. They're not stupid. They're not bad people. They just have an accidentally overinflated sense of how good they are as a singer. But we can look at them and we can go, oh, holy cats, they're not a good singer at all. But for whatever reason, they can't see it. And that happens a lot with UX, with people starting out, where you think like, oh, wow, I took this boot camp. I know all this stuff. I'm ready for action. And I'm over here, or Sam's over here, or Paul, or Darren, or Dr. Nick, and we're going, I took a look at your portfolio and not yet. What do you want to add to that?
Oh, yeah, I mean, 100% I agree. And that's not to say that you won't get experience. Everybody does. Everybody learns more. I'm definitely not here to shit on the new people, but I'm here to say, like, it's okay to be at the bottom at first. You won't be there forever, but it's where we all got to start out. And it's I think that for those times where it's like you don't really know that much, like we talked about, get mentorship from your company. If you can't get mentorship from your company, then hire like a UX coach, or sign up for like the Interaction Design Foundation or something like that. Make sure that you're constantly educating yourself about how you can get better and how basically how you can, like, I guess, learn UX the right way and not the overinflated ego way.
Yeah, good points. Good points. Now I think Paul asked this twice and I keep missing it. So let me get it up on the screen so we can get your thoughts on it. Paul is asking, ask Sam, what are the essentials the junior practitioner should have to develop the self-confidence necessary to embrace a role? I think that's hard for a junior practitioner to know when they're ready for the aforementioned reasons. Sam, what do juniors need to do and have to be ready?
Now, Paul, are you specifically asking, like, if you're not in a role or if you are in a role and you're trying to grow?
Good question. We'll have to see what he says. YouTube's usually 20 seconds delayed, so we should hear from him very quickly.
Okay.
So that's a good part about YouTube. The people in LinkedIn are 3 minutes behind us, and that always makes conversation a little bit tough. And so that's why I remind people, won't you please come subscribe on YouTube, where it's a little bit more of a conversation. Paul says, what if you're not in a role? So it sounds like, what are the essentials a junior practitioner should have to develop the self-confidence necessary to embrace a role they're not in yet, to be ready for it?
Okay, so I would say the number one thing to do is do real life projects. I know that's not always a necessarily easy thing to do, but like, if you qualify for an internship, which if you're in college, you can get into most internships. If you're not, unfortunately, you can't. Like, I had a bachelor's degree and had been at a college for several years before I got into UX, and that was it. Like, I couldn't get into internships, but I found, like, for example, there were little startups that I found on AngelList who were able to take me, and then I was able to go in. I did free work for them, but that's how I was able to get some experience. I led a project for the big Ocean Button X Prize challenge. I mean, and by led, I mean I just gathered a couple developers, and my girlfriend was a UI designer at the time. I was still like very much learning, but I led it to the best of my abilities that I could. And just like, I say, just like, go out there, put as much as you can, put stuff in the real world, or work on stuff that is already live, that's in the real world. There's like volunteer matches, a really good way to get experience. And I think, like, with experience comes confidence. So even though you're not going to know everything after working on these things, like, you're able to get a little bit more confident about your skills every single day. Debbie, there's one more thing I would like to add in.
Please.
And that is for applying for jobs. So I think that a lot of people, brand new UX designers who haven't landed their first role yet, they get really discouraged when they see all of these, they get all of these auto rejection emails constantly. And I know that sucks, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's a mental game. You don't want to focus on the auto rejection emails. Yeah, no problem, Paul. You don't want to focus on the auto rejection emails. You want to focus on your wins. So I equate this to like a baby learning how to walk. The baby's going to be crawling around for a while, and then eventually they're going to get up, and then they're going to fall down. They're going to get up and fall down, and they're going to get up, and it's going to repeat over and over. But then eventually they're able to stand, and then they fall down, and then they can stand up. But they know, hey, I can stand up. I can do this a little bit faster, a little bit better. They stand up, and then they fall down. And then eventually they're able to stand and kind of hobble around and then keep their momentum. And then they try walking, and then they fall down. And then they get up, and then they try walking and fall down. But it's eventually they're able to hobble to the other side of the room. I equate that to getting your first UX job. You're gonna fall down a lot, but it's like, if you can land your first interview, then that's like being able to stand, and then you fall, and then you can get, hey, I can get an interview. I can do this again. So then you get another one, and then you're able to go to the second interview, and then the third interview, and eventually you'll get to the final interview. And even if you don't make that, you can get to that final interview, so you're able to do it a little bit faster, a little bit better. Like it would be, yes, it would be like getting mad at yourself every time you get a rejection would be like the parents standing there and criticizing the baby for not being able to walk. Like, no, you stupid baby, you can't walk. Why do you suck at this? Like, you don't want to do that.
Don't do that. And we were laughing because I wrote on the screen, getting a UX job is like a stumbly, falling toddler trying to break into prison.
I didn't quite mean to make the analogy like that.
I put them all together.
So, yeah.
I glued all the analogies together, and auditioning for American Idol. The only thing I want to add to what Sam said is I think real projects or highly realistic projects are really important for practice, but I feel, and we just said this in episode 73 last week, which was debunking bad UX portfolio advice, it's really important for you to have that mentor or coach, because if you don't have somebody looking over that work, then your real or realistic work is going to be you guessing. And you're not going to know what you're doing right or wrong. You might not be learning or leveling up. And then you're going to say, great, I did a real or fake project. Where's my job now? So you got a piano teacher. You had a tennis teacher. You went to karate class. Everybody, it's time to get some sort of mentor or coach who can help you out. Katie says, love the baby metaphor. Actually makes me feel better about the process. Thank you all so much for doing this. Thank you, Katie. Sam, we've got another about 15 minutes. Your next point number 8, was no. Your first, and probably not even second job out of your boot camp will not be at Google, Lyft, Netflix, Airbnb, etc. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so again, these boot camps, they'll sell you on this idea that you're going to work at Google after graduating, you're going to work at Netflix, you're going to work at Airbnb. And the truth is that unless you have a ridiculous amount of connections at that company already, and everybody knows you so well and loves you enough to bring you on, like, you're not going to get hired there at your first job or your second. I mean, I've talked to UX designers who have like over 10 years of experience who still say that getting into Google is really hard. And it's, but at the same time though, I think so many people set their sights on getting into that top tech company. And they think like, oh, if I get into a top tech company, I'm going to be successful. And that's just not how it is. In fact, a lot of people are able to they're able to have a very successful UX career without even setting foot in a top tech company. Saying that you have to work at Google in order to be successful is like saying I need to have a degree from Harvard in order to get a job. And that's simply just not true. There's a ton of very intelligent people who never go to an Ivy League school or even
any
go to
school.
college. Yeah, exactly. For the same reason that you don't need to work in a top tech company to have a really successful career.
I haven't worked at a top tech company, and I kind of don't plan to.
Yeah.
I'm also concerned about some of their ethics. And so they may be a top tech company. Maybe I'm a customer, maybe I'm not, but I'm also worried some of them have made some publicly ugly, unethical decisions. I'm not sure I'd want to be associated with that. That's me.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that whenever you're evaluating a company, that's one of the very important things to remember is that does this company get an idea of whether this company aligns with your personal morals or not. I remember, well, actually, I don't, obviously this was a long time ago when Google started, but their motto was "Don't be evil." And now, they're basically just like stealing people's data and selling it to the highest bidder. And it's you want to be
Slightly
aware, like,
evil.
yeah, like, do you want to work for a company that basically just steals people's data and sells it to people?
Oh, then you don't want
For
to work at
example.
Facebook.
Oh no.
That just heads up there. Yeah, so without pooping on everybody, I agree with Sam. There's certainly many wonderful jobs and experiences you can have that might not be the top companies. When I first moved to San Francisco, recruiters said to me, "You're nobody, you're nothing, you'll never work here because you haven't worked at Google, Apple, or," and this will date this, TiVo. Who remembers TiVo? No, not Sam. Okay, so
I do, actually.
okay. So and I was like, well, that can't be the only way we're ever going to measure me. So I'm just going to go for it. Point number 9, and guys, we're live. Ask any questions you have, make any comments you have. I'm checking the LinkedIn chat, the YouTube chat, and also keeping half an eye on any tweets with the hashtag DeltaCX in it. Point number 9 in your Super Medium article was, don't become a UX designer just because you want to escape your previous career. I know there's a lot of ads in a lot of cities that are basically saying, hey, would you like a stable job that pays a lot of money? Come be a UX whatever. Help us with this, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll see a lot of people come into UX from a career transition, is what I've noticed. In fact, from my observation, it seems like more people are making a career transition into UX than they're studying UX. I mean, even though UX has technically been around for a long time, people didn't really know about it until recently. So there's a lot of people that are coming in because they're like, oh, I worked at a call center and I didn't like that job, so I'm going to go into UX. And it's like, well, okay, why do you want to go in there? Just because it pays more? Because you'll be working at an office with a ping pong table and beer? Like, is that really, like, are you really motivated by these like superficial things, or do you really like the concept and the process behind user experience? Do you like uncovering data? Do you like talking to people? Do you like even like the unsexy things, like identifying some of the elements on your client site that aren't working, and then like writing a presentation about it and documenting links and stuff? Do you like being able to handle problems when they're going sideways? Do you like launching and then seeing like how it's doing in the real world and then retesting and everything? I tell people, like, the reason why you want to get into this field is because of like free beer and money and like cool offices and stuff. Like, you gotta really evaluate yourself. You may just be happier working at Chuck E. Cheese and then just like playing in the ball pit after work. But if you are getting into user experience because you genuinely like solving the problems that encompasses UX, like, forget any of the, forget the cool offices, forget the money, forget any of that stuff. If you just had to do this one thing for, let's say you had to do it for like 30 more years, or 40 or 50, but all of your needs were met and your bills were paid, but you had to do one job. If it was user experience, regardless of any of that fluffy stuff, then you're in the right track. Otherwise, you got some self-evaluation you got to do. And I definitely see plenty of people who get into this field who are not meant to be UX designers. People who are like, for example, people who think that UX is graphic design. They should not be doing UX research at all. That doesn't mean they're a bad person or anything. It just means that, like, and you look at like the research that like the Nielsen Norman Group does, for example, where they're really diving deep in on a lot of these designs, and they're using linear regression models and everything. Like, if you're not a numbers person, don't do UX research. If you're like an asshole and you can't lead people, you shouldn't be in a director position. If if you can't interview people and uncover like the bigger, broader picture of like what your company's trying to do, then you probably shouldn't be, or if you're going to be an asshole, like a crabby asshole to the people you're talking to, you probably shouldn't be doing usability studies. And like I'm in my case, of course, like I'm not a perfect person, no one is, but
are you a crabby asshole?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I am.
.com.
At least I'm honest.
Yeah.
No, but you really got to evaluate, like, are these traits that you've seen in yourself that, say like your other bosses in your previous job have told you, like, hey, you are you're a jerk. We don't like working with you. How well is that going to translate over if how well is that going to translate over? And I think it's really important for people to realize that not everybody's cut out to be a UX designer, and that's okay. There's Debbie, I know you were talking about how you were like, you wanted to be a neurosurgeon, and then
I was going to be a genetic researcher.
Oh yeah. And like in my case, I was in the wildlife sciences. I would not have been happy continuing down that path if I didn't come to the realization that maybe I wasn't cut out for this, and that's fine.
Yeah, and you're right. I have written about that and talked about that I'd planned my whole life and university and other things around being a genetic researcher, and luckily I was doing some badly paid summer jobs in a hospital research laboratory where I met wonderful people, and finally one of them said to me, I don't think this is for you. And I had a bad reaction to that. I was pretty grumpy for a few months. But after a few months, it kind of sunk in, and I was like, oh, holy poop on a stick, this isn't for me. And when I quit all my science classes at college, I had this huge hole in my schedule because I didn't need other classes. I had fulfilled all of my requirements. I had finished my music major. I took psychology classes for fun, and that's what influenced me most in UX. And so, from the everything happens for a reason bucket, if UX isn't for you, you might stumble on what is, and that's still a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, I mean, finding out that, say, like, if user experience is not what you want to be doing, then it doesn't mean that you aren't capable of being a functioning person in society. It just means that your skills and your gifts may be aligned in some other areas.
We've got a question. Friend of the show, Kushbu, is here and says, hey, Debbie and Sam, I'm in second year of my graduation and I've just started practicing and learning about UX and I've received an internship. I can't remember everybody's everything, but I think Kushbu might be from an engineering background. I've received an internship. I'm not feeling so confident about it. Should I go for it? I know what my answer is. Sam, what do you say?
I guess I'm not really sure what you mean about you're not feeling confident about it, because I mean that's kind of a broad statement. I would evaluate, like, why are you not confident about it? Is it because you don't think you would like this kind of work? I think the advantage to an internship is that if it's only going to last a few months and you go into it and you realize that you don't like doing this specific thing, then if anything, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that can be a great opportunity to learn about maybe what you do want to do. Maybe you like the field, but you're not confident about the team, or you're not confident about the company. I mean, again, like, I think that if it's just a few months, it's probably not that big of a deal, in my opinion. But again, like, I don't know the context behind what you're not confident about. So I would say just, like, evaluate it, but at the same time realize that maybe if it's only like a 3-month internship, then you might be okay.
My answer to that would be it depends what you're looking to get out of it. If you expect that the internship is going to teach you things and level you up, then you have to check that the company has mentors and coaches for you and plans to teach you and plans to level you up. When I worked at a company I won't name, we had summer interns come in. They were given a project and people checked in on them like once a week, and I felt like they really weren't getting the mentoring and coaching and help leveling up that they needed. They were really left most of the time to guess and wing it. So I think about what you are expecting from that experience and decide if it's worth it to have it on your resume or CV, or if it's going to give you some of that leveling up you're looking for. We've got another question. Julia says, and it's Julia with a hard J, as I remember from last time. If there's time, can you share your thoughts on imposter syndrome? I have a master's degree and a good job, yet being a junior and not knowing it all makes me doubt myself almost daily. Sam, imposter syndrome.
All right. Well, I know me and Debbie talked about this actually earlier, and I thought she had some really interesting insights about this. So I actually wrote kind of like a part 2 to this. It's called Some Sage Advice for an Aspiring Bootcamp People from, I didn't even, sometimes even I don't remember the titles that I wrote, but it's basically the part 2 to this. And I talk about this whole idea of imposter syndrome and, originally when I was writing about it, I was going to come at the cliche like, oh, this is imposter syndrome and how you overcome it. But then I was talking to Debbie and she said, hey, I interviewed Dr. Seth Finkel and he was talking about how it's whenever you have this feeling of imposter syndrome, that's actually a good thing because it's a sense of self-awareness of maybe where you are right now. And I would say instead of letting it eat at you, say, okay, I feel nervous about this because, fill in the blank, and then say, okay, I'm nervous because maybe, I don't know, like I don't feel confident with statistics that are required in my job, or I don't feel confident because I don't know Sketch or something like that. What I would do is I would boil it down to something very specific and concrete. Don't just have this vague this vague idea of like I'm stressed, because then you're not going to be able to figure out what's wrong and you're not going to be able to address it. So boil it down to very concrete things that you're going to be able to solve, and then I would just like work through those individually one by one.
Yeah, and I would say go back into the archive in the live stream podcasts universe in the YouTube channel, which is the Delta CX YouTube channel, and look for episode 10, Imposter Syndrome. We had Seth on, and we talked about some different angles on imposter syndrome, and I've heard it was helpful to people, so I would say take a look at that. People are cheering on Kushbu and saying, go for that internship. And Josephine wants to tell Julia, therapy and lifelong learning will be the way to work with imposter syndrome. Now we have a question from Barath. Let's put that one up, and we're almost out of time. I can't believe it. What was we missed number 10 in your article. Let's say it quickly. Contrary to belief, your job is not just to design for users. It is to drive business outcomes, increase companies' revenue, and make your involvement on the team worth your salary. Give us a couple of thoughts on that because we're running out of time.
Cool. So yeah, to summarize this is that I hear a lot of UX juniors say, oh, I'm here to design for users. Okay, well, users is a very trendy and vague term. I think Jared Spool even equated it to, is like, why are we calling them users? They're not drug addicts.
I hate Jared Spool. Keep going.
Anyway, so what I say to people is as far as like what you're designing for is realize that the reason why you're there is because you want to increase company metrics. They hired you because you're going to optimize their software. You're going to optimize their websites. And you're going to make it, like if you're working on an e-commerce site, for example, instead of having them go through 20 steps to buy this item, which I remember like eBay back when it was like super popular and it was like 2000, like early 2000s, it was terrible buying stuff. Like you had to go through like 30 steps. And now it's like Amazon, it's just like 2, 3 clicks, apply. I mean, not that people really use eBay anymore, but it's, like your job is ultimately to optimize whatever you're working on so that your company can get more revenue. Now, yes, you do want to make this a delightful experience for your users. I say that's secondary. Your primary is like realize why your company hired you, because they ultimately they looked at you as an investment and they want to see like what they can get out of this.
And what I tell people is that we have to find the balance of that, because we know we want to make things great for users, customers, humans, whatever we're calling them, but we also know that the company has some goals that they need to achieve. Those revenue goals and other goals, and we just have to find where in the Venn diagram we can get those to combine. Sometimes where we work, it seems like they are not even close. Customers need this, the company wants to build this. We need to try to work to get these a little bit more aligned. I still don't know how companies can claim they're agile, know the customer needs this, and then want to build this. Agile would say we have to shift what we're doing so that we can build the right thing. We're almost out of time. Can you stay a couple more minutes, Sam, and we can answer that one last question? Thank you so much. I apologize to your job for keeping you. So the question was from Barath. How does UX juniors get past the experience loop? Most of the companies ask experienced UX designers in their team. So what I think what he's saying is, how do we get past all of these jobs that are looking for experience? It seems like nobody wants to be the entry-level job. They all want experience. Do you have a thought there?
I do, actually. In fact, I very recently wrote an article about how I was able to get the attention of these companies that I was interviewing for, even when I had no experience. So I would say, in addition to what we talked about, so you go on like Angel List, or like even I know like hackathons are not an ideal way, but to get experience. But hey, look, if it gives you confidence, if it gives you experience, it gives you a little bit more experience or something to show, then okay, fine, do it. But what I did, and I'll talk a little bit about my other article that I wrote, is when I was first starting, I'll give an example of like one of the projects that I did. So Home Depot in Atlanta, Georgia, that's where their headquarters are. They hire a lot of UX people. And I remember applying to a job with them. I had no experience, but I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to try and get this job anyway. And I realized that I didn't like my lack of experience at the time was a huge detriment. So what I did is I put on my UX hat before I even got the interview. So yes, I put on my Mickey Mouse hat and I walked there was a Home Depot that was like a few blocks away. So I went to that Home Depot and I looked at how like their checkout process was set up. And I took like specific notes of it. I observed the people coming through. Obviously, this wasn't like great sample data or anything, but it's what I had to go off at the time. And I looked at like how people were struggling in the checkout screens. And then I used their app and I was trying to like find certain things with the app. And I was even like talked to a couple people about like, hey, did you use the app? Like, what did you think of it? And then I went to the paint department and I introduced myself as someone who's trying to get a job to improve the software flow and therefore make their job easier. And I said, hey, if I get this job, hopefully I can help make your job a little bit easier. Can you help me? And they were like, oh yeah, sure. Like this is shit and this doesn't string together well. And like all this is awful. And it was such great, juicy information. What I did is I put all that into a presentation. I said, look, these are all the problems that I've noticed with Home Depot about how their interfaces are set up. This is how I would come in and how I would solve it. I even put together some mock prototypes and everything, or some wireframes. And then I put it into a presentation. I sent that to the recruiter with my resume. And that actually got me an interview. like I would have been one of those people that just got the auto rejection email, but because I went that far, that actually got me picked up.
Did you get the
And
job?
even though I didn't get
Okay.
no, I didn't get the job. They fell back on like, oh, you need experience, and that's fine. But I've done this over and over and over, and you could read that article. But I did it like another job that I applied to. Like they wanted knowledge of HTML and CSS, so I put together this stupid little like baseball card that was made out of HTML that was like flippable, and I made it custom to that company, and I showed it to the interviewers, and then that got me to a final round interview where they paid for me to fly out to Boston and do like a full day interview. I've done that with like more recent companies that I've interviewed with, and that, especially when you've got like experience paired with that hyper specific project that you've done that shows that what you're capable of doing, then that's like superpower level, at least in my experience of being able to get these jobs. It's helped me quite a bit. So I would say if you have no experience, just like put on your UX hat, create something that, and you could get really creative about this, but something that's like very specific to that company you're trying to apply to, and then see how well that works out. Test, iterate, retest.
And to add to that, we just talked about this last week in episode 73, and where we drew the line was we said it's a little bit weird if you just do what Sam is saying and send it to a company like, hey, check me out, I'm redesigning your stuff. And people might be like, bitch, you don't know anything about our stuff. What are you doing? But I think the fact that Sam had a recruiter, he had somebody he could talk to, he had somebody he could apply to, and he could kind of send this in with a job application, I think it makes a little bit more sense. Whereas the example we used last week was, it came from some article or LinkedIn post we saw where someone was like, hey, just do this and then just send it to the company and be like, check out what I could do. And we thought, man, they don't even have an open job. That's just kind of creepy. You know, would I want someone to write to me and go, hi, I saw your Delta CX website. Here's 12 things I hate about it, so I redesigned it. And I'd be like, what do you know about this? So I think that one can go both ways, but I think if you have a relationship with someone there and there's a recruiter you're applying, it could be an interesting approach. And, you know, look, you can always try stuff, and if it falls flat, you put it in your portfolio and show it to the next people.
Absolutely. I will say that, you know, what I described, it's a double-edged sword. It does take a lot of time. It may just like drop down a black hole and you never hear from it. Or, you know, like Debbie was talking about, like it could actually backfire and they're like, what are you talking about? What do you know about us? But if you are applying for that role and they want to see what you're capable of, I think that is the sweet spot to do something like this.
All right. Well, then on that note, we are running way over this time. Sam, thanks for coming to the show and staying a little bit extra. So remind everybody where they can find you and follow you.
Yeah, so you can read my articles on medium.com. It's on the UX Collective blog. Again, my name is Samuel Harper. You can also find, I have a personal blog where I post all my articles. So it's called Growing into UX. So if you don't have a Medium subscription, then you can go to Growing into UX, and none of my stuff there is gated, so you can read all my articles for free. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. So it's linkedin.com/SharperUX.
Harper UX. Okay, great. Everybody find the Sam, follow the Sam, talk to the Sam. And I'm going to have to wrap up. So, Sam, thank you so much for coming. Great to see you again. And we'll have to figure out another topic and have another adventure. And I guess with that, we will play, I'll play the song so we're out of here. And I hope to see everybody next week for more of our live adventures. Thanks again.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Delta CX is available for consulting and projects related to CX and UX strategy, leadership, training, problem finding, problem solving, and innovation. Learn more at deltacx.com.